Greetings fellow members of the Esoteric Order of Gamers. Welcome to the last part in my series on how to build and paint Hunt for the Prometheus, the starter set for Dystopian Wars by Warcradle Studios. These ships are just gorgeous models and I've really enjoyed painting them. This is the last part of the initial series, but I'm going to be doing more coverage of Dystopian Wars in the future. They're releasing new ships all the time and they all look absolutely amazing. I'm looking forward to getting them on the tabletop and playing the game. For now, let's paint the Covenant of the Enlightened. Now, just before I get started, I mentioned in the first video that I'm using the new membrane by Redgrass Games. Now, they're coming up with a Kickstarter soon in the end of May, and it's going to be a new palette, a new wet palette, but it also has this new membrane which is rewashable. I've used this one 4 times now and it's still great, so let's try it out. Let's go for a 5th. Here it is, completely covered with paints. I'll go give it a wash and bring it back and see how it looks. And there you go, I've washed it again. It's almost as good as new and all ready to be loaded up with paint again. This new membrane is just fantastic, a complete game changer from Redgrass Games. Got to say, I love their wet palette. The only thing I didn't think was fantastic is the fact that I had to use a new membrane every time, or a new sheet of paper every time. This one is just, I keep rewashing it and it keeps being used. It's just brilliant. I don't know how long it's going to last, but already it's been fantastic. So there you go, Redgrass Games, look out for that Kickstarter. They send me stuff to review, of course, but I think it's great and I'm very happy to plug it. Right, let's get started on the Covenant of the Enlightened, and I'm going to be painting this Lovelace cruiser as an example of how to paint the entire range, and then we'll have a look at the larger resin ships. Now, of course, you can use any colour scheme you wish, experiment, do whatever you want. I took a little while to come up with this colour scheme for this set of ships. I wanted something a bit unusual, a bit interesting, and I decided to take inspiration from unusual naval camouflage patterns and also from the artwork itself. Here's the Warcradle image of the enlightened ships, and as you can see, it's got that camouflage pattern on there. These are a little bit dark because my Russian Commonwealth ships are quite dark. I wanted these to be a bit lighter, but this is the basic inspiration. So from there, let's see what I did. The first thing I did was undercoat the ships with Corax White Spray by Citadel, giving me a nice white base. So here it is, and the first thing I'm going to use is Ulthuan Grey. And this is my base colour for the enlightened ships. So I'll get a large brush and get some of that. Now I'm putting it on almost solidly, but I'm just wiping off the excess here, and then a very rough paint over the whole thing. You can see there's not a huge amount of difference in shade, but it just makes it slightly greyer. And because they're so close in shade, you don't have to be precise with this coat. Okay, first thing is to just let that dry. Now before I start on the camouflage pattern, I'll show you the final result that I'm going for. And you can see I've got a 2-stripe pattern over the ship. It looks quite distinctive, doesn't it? I think this works pretty well. So I've got a dark stripe, and I'm using, for that one, Dark Reaper. And then there's also some light blue accents, and for that I'm using Fenrisian Grey. But the important thing is to get this Dark Reaper stripe right, and I've placed these stripes equidistant along the body of the ship, and I've put them at different angles just to make it look interesting. They're not straight across. Sometimes they go with the shapes of the ship, and sometimes they go straight across them, and it gives it this interesting zigzaggy pattern which looks quite sci-fi and interesting. And actually, if you look up online, there are precedents for this kind of camouflage in ships in reality. They used to do this kind of pattern to make it difficult to see the direction that a ship was sailing in, and to just camouflage it. Alright, get yourself some Dark Reaper and put it on your palette. And then I'm going to mix this with Lamian Medium. Now I usually water down paints with water, but in this case I want it to be a bit more watery. I want it to flow a bit more, but I don't want to have the pigment break up too much, so I'm using Lamian Medium. And this is where we carefully start putting the pattern on. Now I'm just doing this freehand. I'm just going to do a line down the side And this is how I'll be doing all these lines. Do a line to give me direction, and then I slowly sort of widen the line, making sure the edges of the line are nice and clean. And this is where you need a steady hand and just paint carefully and make sure that that line is the same width all the way along and has nice sharp edges. You can always touch it up later if you make a little mistake, but just try and get it right the first time and be as neat as possible. Now it doesn't matter if there's some streaking in there, you can do another coat over the top of it. So I'll continue this line, then I'll move the model over to the other side and continue the line. And this time I'm going to go at a different angle just to make it a bit more interesting. Go down that way. And I'm trying to keep the line at the same width throughout. So there's my first line, and I'm going to continue this technique all the way along the body of the ship, and just making it up as I go along and trying to keep these lines roughly equidistant. So the next one will go down there, and then when I hit this bit here, I'm going to head off in a different direction just to give it a zigzaggy feel. Now for detail work like this, you really need good brushes, good quality brushes. As I said in the first video, I'm using Rosemary & Co. This is a number 2, and you're not going to get any of those sort of stray bristles or difficulties like that that are going to make this hard. It flows on quite cleanly. You can see that's a pretty clean line. And then you just continue this, and the trick is, of course, you're going over kind of bumpy surfaces and things, so it's slightly challenging but not too hard. And if you've got your paint diluted by the Lamy and medium, it will flow on pretty easy, and it'll flow on over those bumps. So let's head down there. And then again I'm going to go off at an angle. Now of course, real world camouflage patterns are designed to disguise the contours of the ship, so you wouldn't necessarily be pointing them out by going off at an angle like this when you hit a particular contour, but this makes it look a bit more interesting, doesn't it? If it was just a straight line going across, even at an angle, it wouldn't be quite as visually interesting. That's what I think anyway. There's another one. This is the challenging bit around here where it's really bumpy, and also over these things is quite challenging. Now I'm going to paint these particular bumps in green, so it doesn't matter if I'm accurate when I go over that because I'm going to paint over it again. So I'll just go down here. You can see that initial line is really rough, but because it's watery it's going into all the gaps, and then I can carefully fill it out to the right width. Now this thing is going to have a weapon in it, so I just go over the lip. As I said, you can see some streaks in there, but I can put a second coat on there easily to make that colour flatter. Let's have another one going down here. Now that one's a little bit messy. As you can see, it's flowed a bit down there. I can easily fix that up with some Althuan grey a little bit later, so don't panic if you make a mistake. These nice zigzag patterns work well. Now I'm going to go extend this line over here. So I'll just do it roughly first to give me some guidance, and then fill in the edges. As you can see, having that diluted paint makes all the difference. So I've just gone back and thickened those lines slightly. I just wanted to match my existing one, so the lines had to be a little bit thicker, but that's easily done. Once they're actually painted in there, thickening them is quite easy. Now I've let those front ones dry so I can hold the ship without damaging the paintwork I've already done. And there we go, they're the main camouflage lines. Let's let that dry before we go to the next stage. Now that's dry, I'm going to put in the light blue grey with Fenrisian grey. And again, just a little bit of Lamian medium to make it flow. Now I don't want to put this on quite as strongly as the dark colour, but I do want to sort of fill in some gaps or extend some of the lines. There's quite a large visual gap between these two, so let's copy this line with a blue line and just follow that down neatly. And there we go, there's my basic camouflage pattern. Now there's only one bit I'm not happy with, and that's this bit here. I filled in that wedge and there's too much blue on either side there. So I can always go back with Ulthuan Grey and make an adjustment. I might paint over that area and move the line. But the idea is just to get a nice balanced effect between the colours and feel like you've got a nice proportion of each. Of course, if you have streaky bits, remember, go back with a second coat after it's dry and fill them in so you have relatively flat colour, because we're going to wash this to bring out the detail. And there you go, I've just cleaned up that bit with a bit of the grey again, and that looks a little bit better. Now I'm going to start defining all the detail in this model, and for that I'm using Nuln oil, and I'm going to dilute it a little bit with Lamian medium because I don't want it to spoil my grey colour too much. I just want it to sit in the recesses. So about a brush full of both, and then I'll just start painting. I'm not being too super careful, but I'm just defining all the little areas of detail, just painting it into the recesses. If it colours the light grey too much, I can always retouch it later. But you can see with areas like this where there's quite a bit of detail, I can just paint it over the whole area. Over all these little portholes. So I'm not washing it over the entire figure, but I'm just directing it into the shadow areas and the areas where there are details. It's also making all those little rivets pop out as well. When that's dry, I'll paint in a few metallic areas with Ironbreaker. Just these engines at the back. And this large bit of pipes at the front here. After that's dried, I'll get some white scar and paint over all of these little areas here, which I'm going to make green. Next I'll paint in some of the portholes with Caliban green. a little bit of iron breaker on the doors. Now I'm going to wash those two metal areas with Nuln oil and wash all the white areas with Technical Tesseract Glow. It doesn't matter if I get a bit of the green on the area around the glow because it looks like light reflecting or emanating from it. Now I take this Coelia green shade and wash the green areas. This will define the lines better. I'm using Scorpion Green for the windows. This is an old one. The new version of this is called Moot Green. And then when that's dry, I'm going to mix some white with that green to highlight all of these green areas. All that remains now is to do a final highlight pass, and of course I'm going to highlight the metal areas with silver, Stormhost silver, and then for the rest of the areas of the model I'll be using lighter versions of their colours. So the Ulthuan grey, I'll use white to highlight that, or close to white. For the light blue, the Fenrisian grey with a bit of white mixed in. And for the, what's that called, the dark blue, which is Dark Reaper, I'll mix some of the Fenrisian grey with Dark Reaper to get a lighter colour. And basically this is just all about adding a sense of scale to the model by highlighting all the sharp areas where light would hit the model. So let's start with the whites and just do little white highlights on the grey areas. I can also pick out all these tiny little rivets if I want to. Oh, those lines are messy. I'm holding this at a funny angle, so it's a little bit difficult, but try and do this neatly. And just the edges, as you can see, where light would hit. You can use the edge of the brush to do that. So this will take a little while, but I'll just have a bit of patience and just highlight all these bits. The more of this little detailed highlighting you do, the more of a sense of scale the figure will have. Now when I'm doing the light blue areas, I want to mix a bit of white with my light blue here on my palette. And then if there are any bits where the light blue crosses a sharp edge, I can then highlight that bit. This also makes our camouflage pattern integrate more effectively into the model itself. And I'll keep doing those. For the dark areas, of course, we're going to mix a bit of Fenrisian grey into our original blue, and then we can use that to highlight those bits. So I'll keep doing this over the whole model. Just do as much detail as you're comfortable with until it looks good. Remember, as always, you're going to be seeing this from a distance on the tabletop, so don't be too obsessive about it. But you can see how little bits like that highlight there
just make that little part of the ship lift and have a sense of scale. I'm also using black to paint in the little portholes. Just a nice little extra detail. And any of these little engine ports as well. And there it is, my finished Lovelace cruiser. You can see I put the weapons in here. Now actually the Lovelace uses the particle beamers, which is a different one, but I'll paint those in exactly the same way. I've just made them metal, just as a contrast to the hull, and used the same green, which is of course the dark green, which is Caliban green, followed by meat green, followed by a dot of white. And highlighted, you can see that it just takes on a lot more of a sense of scale, and looks pretty good. So I'm not saying this isn't a quick and easy job. It actually takes a while to paint all of the ships in this manner, but I think the results are pretty spectacular. This is going to look great on the table. So I'm going to continue to do the rest of the ships in exactly the same way. In fact, here's a small one. Let's get one here. If we pop one of these weapons in, these are the smaller ships, the frigates, and you can see exactly the same techniques used for that. This one needs a little bit more highlighting on the green, but that's pretty much done as well. Of course, I'm using exactly the same technique for the larger ships, and this is my camouflage pattern on one of them. I am about to do all the shadowing on this, and I'll show you the final result. And here we have the large ships. You can see I've used the same techniques throughout. There's just a few extra bits. There's some decking here. That's Rhinox hide, highlighted with a bit of Gawthor brown, just dabbed on to add some variety to the brown. Also, I've got inside here and inside there, there's a little bit of water texture, and I've just used a bit of blue and green on my palette, mixed it together and patted it in there, and done a few little bit of highlights, mixing it with white. The cybernetic whale things are pretty much metal, but there's just a few dabs of green in there as well, just to show that they're sort of cybernetically enhanced. Nothing too fancy in there. Of course, at the moment, as I said, I've kept the weapons loose, though I will attach them with a bit of blue tack so they stay in there during the game, and that way I can interchange them. These ones are the particle beamers, which are the different weapons, the other round weapons, and they're just using the same metal and silver highlighting with the little bits of green in there as well. But everything else pretty much the same. I put green on these little portholes as well, and that's the final result. Here's the other one, again just the same. These are all separate, they can pop out, and they're just painted metal with green little glowing highlights as well. Then a few final touches. These are the SRS tokens, painted in the same way. You've got the grey washed with Nuln oil, little bits of highlights of green and white. The ocean itself is Macragge blue, and then washed with Drakenhof nightshade and highlighted with Teclis blue and white. And then finally these great templates that come with the game. Like this, I've just given them a very easy metallic effect. This is Runelord brass, washed with Agrax earthshade, then a rough highlight of Sycorax bronze, and then these little oxide bits, the greeny bits in there, is Nicklac oxide, just a little bit of that to make it look weathered and antique. And of course these clip together to turn into your measuring rulers. And here is the Covenant of the Enlightened fleet, finally complete. Now, I put quite a bit of effort into painting this fleet, I must admit. Doing that camouflage pattern, I think the results are pretty spectacular, but it does take time. So if you're going to do this kind of camouflage, just be warned, it will take a bit of effort. And really, I could keep fiddling with the details of these forever. There's so much detail on these models, they're just gorgeous, especially these resin ones. Look at that, what a spectacular looking ship. You could just keep painting them forever. There's so much detail, and they look better and better the more time you spend on them. But I'm really happy with the results there, and I think this fleet is looking good. Let's have a look at both fleets together on the high seas. And here it is, the Russian Commonwealth and the Covenant of the Enlightened about to go to battle upon the high seas. And I've got to say, what an amazing starter set. You get all of this in the starter set. 2 pretty amazing looking fleets. Once they're painted up, they look fantastic. The models are gorgeous. I mean, look at that model, it's beautiful. There's the templates, of course, and all these ships. And then you can buy your own fleets. There's different fleets that are available, or you can expand upon these. I'm really impressed with the contents of this starter set. You don't often get such impressive looking starter sets for miniatures games, and there's a lot in here. So I hope you've really enjoyed my look at painting these 2 fleets. Look at that. Looks fantastic. It looks like they're charging into war. Let's just move those templates. That is fantastic. What a cinematic shot. That looks just brilliant. Let's try it from the other angle. Wow. If you're wondering what this playmat is, of course, it's the old one from Dreadfleet, the Games Workshop game, and it's fantastic for naval games.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that series on how to build and paint the ships from Hunt for the Prometheus Dystopian Wars starter set. Look out for more Dystopian Wars coverage in the future. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching. I will see you next time. This is the Esoteric Order of Gamers, orderofgamers.com. Go check out the website. I've made a rule summary and reference for Dystopian Wars to make playing the game a lot easier for you. All the rules are on my summary. It's just one summary page, double-sided, and a player reference page. The whole rulebook is squeezed into that and nothing missing. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already and hit the all notifications button. You can check me out on social media as well, and again, visit the website. See you next time. Bye for now.